William Wordsworth. William Wordsworth, April 7, 1770, April 23, 1850, was an English Romantic poet who, with Samuel Taylor Coleridge, helped to launch the Romantic Age in English literature with their joint publication Lyrical Ballads, 1798. Wordsworth's magnum opus is generally considered to be The Prelude, a semi-autobiographical poem of his early years that he revised and expanded a number of times. It was posthumously titled and published by his wife in the year of his death. Wordsworth was poet laureate from 1843 until his death. William's sister, the poet and diarist Dorothy Wordsworth, to whom he was close all his life, was born the following year, and the two were baptized together. William also spent time at his mother's parents' house in Penrith, Cumberland, where he was exposed to the Moors, but did not get along with his grandparents or his uncle, who also lived there. Wordsworth was taught to read by his mother and attended, first, a tiny school of low quality in Cockermouth, then a school in Penrith for the children of upper-class families, where he was taught by Anne Burkett, who insisted on instilling in her students traditions that included pursuing both scholarly and local activities, especially the festivals around Easter, May Day, and Shrove Tuesday. After the death of Wordsworth's mother, in 1778, his father sent him to Hawkshead Grammar School in Lancashire, now in Cumbria, and sent Dorothy to live with relatives in Yorkshire. The year 1793 saw the first publication of poems by Wordsworth, in the collections An Evening Walk and Descriptive Sketches. One of Wordsworth's most famous poems, Tintern Abbey, was published in this collection, along with Coleridge's The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Wordsworth also gives his famous definition of poetry as the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. It takes its origin from emotion recollected in tranquility. Between 1795 and 1797, Wordsworth wrote his only play, The Borderers, a verse tragedy set during the reign of King Henry III of England, when Englishmen in the North Country came into conflict with Scottish border reivers. Wordsworth, Dorothy, and Coleridge travelled to Germany in the autumn of 1798. He wrote a number of other famous poems in Goslar, including the Lucy poems. In the autumn of 1799, Wordsworth and his sister returned to England and visited the Hutchinson family at Soburn. When Coleridge arrived back in England, he travelled to the north with their publisher Joseph Cottle to meet Wordsworth and undertake a proposed tour of the Lake District. Wordsworth's philosophical allegiances, as articulated in the Prelude and in such shorter works as Lines Written a Few Miles Above Tintern Abbey, have been a source of critical debate. It was long supposed that Wordsworth relied chiefly on Coleridge for philosophical guidance, but more recently scholars have suggested that Wordsworth's ideas may have been formed years before he and Coleridge became friends in the mid-1790s. In 1807, Wordsworth published poems, in 2 volumes, including Ode, Intimations of Immortality from Recollections of Early Childhood. Up to this point, Wordsworth was known only for lyrical ballads, and he hoped that this new collection would cement his reputation. In 1810, Wordsworth and Coleridge were estranged over the latter's opium addiction, and in 1812, his son Thomas died at the age of 6 months after the death of 3-year-old Catherine. In 1814, Wordsworth published The Excursion as the second part of the 3-part work The Recluse, even though he never completed the first part or the third part. The poet William Blake, who knew of Wordsworth's work, was struck by Wordsworth's boldness in centering his poetry on the human mind. Coleridge and Charles Lamb both died in 1834, their loss being a difficult blow to Wordsworth. Baylor has pointed out the fact that Wordsworth wanted to invoke the basic feeling that a human heart possesses and expresses. William Wordsworth has used conversation in his poetry to let the poet emerge into we. In 1837, the Scottish poet and playwright Joanna Baillie reflected on her long acquaintance with Wordsworth. Following the death of Robert Southey in 1843, Wordsworth became poet laureate. Wordsworth thus became the only poet laureate to write no official verses. The sudden death of his daughter Dora in 1847 at age 42 was difficult for the aging poet to take, and in his depression, he completely gave up writing new material. William Wordsworth died at home at Rydalmount from an aggravated case of pleurisy on April 23, 1850, and was buried at St. Oswald's Church, Grasmere. Wordsworth has appeared as a character in works of fiction,